Why are you not a utilitarian?
Because it's a terrible system. You can get away with anything.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can. You just have to wait.
What do you mean you just have to wait?
Take the trolley problem. Utilitarians believe that, all things being equal, you should pull the lever, right?
Yes, all things being equal, you sacrifice one life so you can save the 5. Greatest good for the greatest number.
Or in other words, the ends justify the means.
Well,
but here's the strange thing. In order to do any utilitarian calculus between an event and its consequences, you have to pick an arbitrary moment in time to weigh up all the good and bad that's happened as a result of that action. But because time doesn't end, that is never justified, because there's always going to be more consequences that follow on from that.
So your objection is that this is invalid because there will always be more consequences?
Right. If the universe ended 1 minute after it ran over the 1 person rather than the 5, we'd know it was the right call.
Because it maximized good, and then it was game over for everyone.
But obviously that doesn't happen. There are second and third and fourth and 10th order consequences to every action. Maybe by saving the 5, they end up murdering 10, or perhaps one of their descendants kills thousands.
But they might not.
My point is, at any point in time following any action, you will be able to draw a direct causal link to either more good having been caused by it, or more harm having been caused by it. And you need only wait until that moment to justify your action as being the correct one.
Is that true, though? Surely there are lots of actions whereby, no matter how far down the chain of consequences you go, all those consequences are negative.
What in this world only has negative consequences?
So many things.
Such as...
like the invention of nuclear bombs.
the same physics that enables nuclear power.
But when you weigh that against all those deaths...
But who's to say what the alternative would have been to them not being invented? Perhaps their existence minimized harm. And how do we know that 100 years from now, they might be absolutely necessary to stop, say, an asteroid from destroying the entire Earth and eliminating all sentient life completely?
But it's entirely unreasonable to ask people to assess the 10th order consequences of their actions.
I agree, but it doesn't stop those consequences from being real, from still mattering from a utilitarian perspective. It's like the parable of the Chinese farmer. How the hell are you supposed to know, on a small scale, whether your individual actions are going to lead to long-term good or bad?
Look, I agree it's difficult, or perhaps maybe even outright impossible, to predict the long-term consequences of any action on extremely long time scales. But you absolutely can maximize good on short-term time scales, like days or weeks or months or years.
But time as a whole is much, much longer than that. And optimizing for short-term good or pleasure is not at all the same or equivalent to optimizing for long-term good or pleasure. Just ask any drunk or drug addict. On any given day, they're optimizing for pleasure, but they're not doing that over the course of their entire lives. The days just don't add up that way. How do utilitarians know they're not doing exactly the same thing?
But we can't live our lives for the moral good of some far-off future thousands of years from now.
Why shouldn't you?
Because that's absurd.
Look, I'm only taking utilitarianism to its logical conclusion. You wouldn't say someone's life is less valuable if they lived in a different country, if they were separated from you by some vast space, would you?
Obviously not.
So why is separation by time any different? Physics even tells us that space and time are part of the same fabric. Someone's life today is just as valuable as someone's life 100 years from now.
Fine, I agree. The problem is, I don't really think this changes anything, because you can only do your best with the information you have available to you at the time, so...
Let's take utilitarianism seriously, really seriously. If you're a true utilitarian, you should be trying to maximize the good for the time span of when sentient and human life exists, however long that window may be. And as far as we know, trillions of humans could exist in the future, living across galaxies, living lifespans much longer and much better than ours.
I mean, if we don't screw things up.
And given how good that future could be, are you not justified, or indeed even obliged, to do absolutely anything to the comparatively minuscule present to bring that future about? To maximize the good?
But didn't you say we can't predict the consequences of our actions in the long term?
Through the lens of a single action on a single day? Of course not. But if you take a broader perspective, the doomsday clock sits at 90 seconds to midnight. If you needed to sacrifice 4 billion lives to preserve the future of trillions, how is that any different to the trolley problem? Compared to the moral weight of that future, the present's nothing. You could justify anything. All of us today are as sacrificial as the 1 person on the track versus the 5.
So you think either utilitarians are short-sighted and misguided,
or they're not. Which makes them dangerous.